It's very clear. Thank you very much. Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you very much for coming in today, gentlemen. You're probably aware, or you may well be, I'm not sure, of the National Audit Office report that was published this morning that confirms that 11 out of the 12 critical systems that would need replacing or changing in time for next March in the event of no deal are not yet up to acceptable quality. And it also says that new systems needed to help track and examine goods crossing the UK border cannot be built by March 2019. Are you worried by those comments, and would you agree with them? Perhaps Mr. Billington.
I thought it was interesting when we read the technical notice about customs clearance that it stated that they would recommend businesses that trade across the border to hire their customs agents and start to develop their skill set in clearing and completing customs declarations. A substantial number of cross-border businesses are owner-managers. They don't have the resources to hire experts in customs declarations, and there aren't enough customs businesses in Northern Ireland capable of handling those declarations for cross-border trade in Northern Ireland. In addition to that, a number of businesses are applying for what a trusted trader status, authorised economic operator status. There is no facility in Northern Ireland to help businesses with that. They have to work with HMRC in the UK. And there's probably about a 9 to 12 month waiting list to go through the AO status in the normal course. But I know a number of businesses that are now applying for that to manage risk. So there isn't even in the existing system capacity to manage existing mechanisms for trading into a third country. SMEs will not be able to afford the IT, the skill set, or the resources, and there aren't enough customs clearance agents in Northern Ireland capable of handling cross-border trade on the island.
Thank you very much. I also just wanted to touch on this issue of organised crime. Rebecca Sheeran of the National Audit Office gave an interview on the radio this morning where she said that any weaknesses or gaps could quickly be exploited by organised criminals. Just wondering if that, I'm sure that would be an issue that would concern all of you, maybe Mr. Connolly.
So I'll look at it from I sit on the Northern Ireland Business Crime Partnership, and its aim is to make Northern Ireland not only a more competitive but a safer place to do business. One of the things that we've seen over recent years is an increase in cross-border smuggling on things like counterfeit goods, cigarettes. Now this will be the tip of the iceberg as we see it, and there is a real concern that over this past 20 years there has been a growing cooperation between Garda Síochána and the Police Service of Northern Ireland, and they are to be lauded and commended on that. They even have completely changed their minds on business crime. They no longer see it as a victimless crime, and they're putting resource into supporting businesses so that we don't feel the effects of business crime. It is another tangible example of how Brexit's going to could make things harder to do business in Northern Ireland. We are very clear in both the British Retail Consortium and the Northern Ireland Retail Consortium that we want to make sure that the resources are given to the police, and the cooperation that there is between Garda Síochána and the police service in Northern Ireland continues unabated after the 1st of April.
First of all, there was a report by the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee, I think it was 2012, that stated there was £70 million of duty fraud on this island, a loss to the UK Exchequer of £70 million. Normally, and that was frauds run by former paramilitaries. I'd also point the committee to the events around the dioxins. We may recall that several years ago there was dioxins discovered in pigs at the border, and that resulted in a loss to one business of about £6 million and a €25 million cost. The root cause of that was fuel laundering of transformer oil blended into heating oil. An innocent farmer used it to dry animal feed that was fed to 6 nearby farms. It created a €25 million cost to the industry. Worse still was a huge reputational damage. If we have a border with tariff differentials, then you can see whereby, for example, cheap meat coming in from Brazil would be repackaged. Remember Horsegate? Repackaged to be passed off as Irish into a market at a higher price. And I don't think those people will be too concerned about food hygiene standards in the process of doing it. So our anxiety is that honest businesses will work the systems that are tabled. Dishonest businesses will take advantage of any loophole. At the moment, there are only 3 duty differentials that exist: fuel, tobacco and alcohol. If we bring a whole larger portfolio of things in due course, then without strong enforcement, we're at serious risk of having a serious fraud issue.
Thank you, that's very helpful. If I may, just a final question. It's focusing on VAT. So the European Union, when it talks about a UK-wide backstop, it's of course talking about complete alignment on EU excise and VAT law on goods. But Amendment 73 to the Taxation Cross-Border Bill that was passed by this House prevents the UK from continuing its participation in the EU VAT area, which of course would be a key pillar of the current frictionless movement of goods and services. So can you see any way in which the European Union's definition of a UK-wide backstop is compatible with the way in which this Parliament has tied the government's hands on VAT? Mr. Connolly, I know you've had some comments on this.
Yeah, so on the best case scenario, our position in the NIRC is completely the same as the British Retail Consortium, and that's for consumers and businesses in the NI. The whole of the UK and throughout the EU are better off in the common VAT system, and that would be underpinned by alignment to the EU VAT directives in full, with full participation in VES, full participation in MOS as well. And that then would mean, and this is where we come into the contentious part, that would mean that there would be continuing jurisdiction in some part of the CGA in all of this. That, like I said, is the best case scenario. You know, what we've seen from the UK government on VAT within the backstop, we've not really seen anything other than the 2018 system for our statement on common processes between both jurisdictions. I think that you're quite right to say that there's and one opinion would be that our hands are tied on this. While I don't have the complete solution, I would stick with what our assertion would be, that to remove cost and to remove that friction, whether at a UK-wide level or a Northern Ireland level, there needs to be alignment to the EU VAT directives in full.
But
otherwise it's going to be costly.
But my question is, given that Amendment 73 was passed, I mean, the UK government promises no checks for VAT or excise purposes, but we've passed a piece of legislation in this House which makes that utterly impossible to achieve. What are your views on that?
My view has always been that we in industry cannot table solutions that address issues like that, because it is beyond our scope to do it. All we do is, you tell us what you plan to do, we will tell you the consequences of it to the best of our ability, and we will hope to influence better policy than would otherwise be the case. So it is a challenging question, because it is a question in my mind for the UK government to resolve in their negotiation with Europe. It is beyond our ability to engage in this. We will try and work with whatever the consequences are.
Have any of you pointed out to the UK government that there's a fundamental incompatibility between their objective to have a common VAT area as set out in their white paper and the legislation that was passed by Parliament?
Our colleagues in the British Retail Consortium have been in almost constant contact with the Treasury, HMRC, DAXU, BIS. So it is one of the key concerns that national retailers have, and as part of the Northern Ireland Retail Consortium is part of the BRC, so we feed into that, and our voice is heard through the BRC.
And have you received any feedback from the UK government?
I will look into that and I will reply to you.
That would be very